culture is largely, if not wholly, largely organized and dedicated for the benefit of the students. So I begin with certain very preliminary things which all of you might have been knowing indeed, I believe. Renaissance, the word, as we all know, is a French word. It came from medieval French, which again came from Italian Rinascenza, and which again came from Latin nasci, N-A-S-C-I. Nasci means to be born or birth. So Rinascenza, re-nasci, to be born again. These are all known things. So Renaissance is the story and the history of a rebirth, a revival, and a reconstruction. But of what? Obviously, rebirth, revival, and reconstruction of culture as a whole. And when I say quote-unquote culture, I do not refer only to literature and the performing arts or painting and sculpture alone. By culture, we mean the entire cultural ethos of the greater milieu called the Renaissance or the Elizabethan age. Okay, as we all know, once again, that all this started from an incident in 1453, known as the year of fall of Constantinople, which is presently Istanbul. In 1453, the Turks attacked Constantinople, and Constantinople was the hub of Greek scholars. Not only Greek, some of the Roman scholars were also there, but chiefly Greek scholars. And as a result of this attack, the scholars fled to Italy, the safest harbor, the safest shelter that they could as they could find no better place, or rather we might say that under the auspices of the Italian government and their patronage, they found a safe shelter and harbor in Italy. But while moving to Italy, this must be borne in mind with care. Many of the documents, chiefly manuscripts, had already been lost as a result of the Turkish attack. And while carrying the other documents and manuscripts to Italy, they also lost many of them. And many of them were finally found to be extremely mutilated beyond recovery. So this particular incident, on the one hand, indicated a tremendous loss, an irreparable loss on the part of Western culture, and at the same time, it also indicates the beginning of a new culture, the beginning of, we might say, modernism. The seeds or the roots of modernism were beginning to sprout, because these Greek scholars sitting in Italy, where they had been allowed to go on with their researches, studies, and cultivation of knowledge, they tried to recover the lost Greek culture or the classical culture as much as they could. But while recovering and while reviving the old culture, they were in a different time. So uh, one thing which is not usually mentioned, that in reviving the culture, the Greek scholars had to depend a lot on their memory, and whatever they had with them, they were trying to rewrite, recreate, reconstruct them. And therefore the new elements of the new age, of their age, that is the 15th century, they were creeping into the body of classical learning. So it became a very most fortunately, it became a very fusion productive fusion of the old, the traditional, or the classical, and the new, or the developing. So it was a revival and a rereading of the classics, a rediscovery of the classics, and reconstruction of the classics, or the classical learning, literature, arts, overall classical uh, knowledge system, or the older knowledge system, which in technical terms we call epistemology. Episteme, 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 which is knowledge. Well, and as I was talking about the fusion, so it got fused with the new culture, got fused with the new tradition, I'm sorry, the new practices, the fusion of the old tradition with the recent practices. And well, uh, and it was actually the revival of, as I was saying, episteme, which is knowledge, not uh, Plato in his book, both the Republic and Plato talks about, uses another term, doxa, D-O-X-A, doxa. By doxa he means opinion or belief, and Plato places episteme or knowledge against belief or opinion. So epistemology, or reviving the epistemological system, was not dependent uh, on belief or opinion. But what actually happened, these Greek scholars who fled to Italy as a result of the Turkish attack on Constantinople in 1453, these scholars could not avoid the waves of their contemporary times, and therefore there was the birth of a new epistemological system or knowledge system. Right. As you know, uh, in those ages, before the Renaissance actually occurred, and a bit later, as a twin movement, Renaissance was a movement. It didn't happen overnight. No historical event ever happens overnight. So it took a long time, and Renaissance was a continuing movement for, we could say, more than 2 centuries. So from the 15th to the 16th centuries, in fact, it continued also in the 17th century. As you know, from the works of Shakespeare and others. So as a parallel to this, or as a twin movement, Reformation was also occurring, regarding which I will talk in my next lecture somewhat in detail, because we have limited time to cope up the whole thing. The dominance, the social, political, and cultural dominance was by the RCC, that is Roman Catholic Church, which was indeed absolutely a monolithic kind of a structure, social and religious structure. And it was for the first time in the Renaissance that new ideas were being born, new ethos was being born, and the monolithic dominance of the Roman Catholic Church began to be undermined for the first time. Before this, everything went by the words of the church. And what is this undermining? Because in the church system, there was a kind of a monopoly. Monopoly not only in religion, but in everything. I will talk about monarchy also later on. Well, so this monolithic dominance was challenged and undermined, and humanism was given preference or priority. So it is the prioritization of humanism. Humanism prioritized and humanism foregrounded human entity, especially I would say individual entity. Community was not less important, but that individual was the repertoire, the reservoir of immense, endless creative potential, that man could do so many things. However, I'll go to that later on. So humanism was prioritized or foregrounded, and individualism, the individual, quote unquote, was prioritized, foregrounded, and given importance. Because the Renaissance began, cherishing a tremendous faith in the creative potential of man. Creative potential of man. Tonmoy, hello, are you present?
No. Madhusmita Sasmal. It's okay now. So some of them trying to present in order.
No. I mean, are you present in the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just ask one question for the benefit of students.
Yes, sir.
May I use sometimes a couple of Bengali sentences, Bangla sentences?
Yes, sir, of course, sir.
For them, it would be well, faith in tremendous, as I was saying, creative potential. Ekta manush je, say for example, fall of man-er moto ekta chobi aঁকতে পারে, লাস্ট সাপারের মতো একটা ছবি আঁকতে পারে, মোনালিজার মতো একটা ছবি আঁকতে পারে, রেবেকার মতো একটা স্কাল্পচার তৈরি করতে পারে, ডেভিডের মতো একটা স্কাল্পচার তৈরি করতে পারে। এটা আমি শুধু স্কাল্পচার এন্ড পেইন্টিং এ বললাম, in all fields. So at the same time, there was a growing faith in the freedom of the individual. So creative potential on one hand and freedom of thought on the other. Not only freedom of thought, but at the same time, I should say freedom of right or freedom to rights. So rights of the individual. And the new thing, the new element in the cultural practices, the new element in the entire cultural ethos of the period that we get is free will. Regarding free will, I don't know whether PG students are here. So if you are here, you must be,
Yes, they are here.
they are
Yeah.
there. So they must be reading Dr. Faustus by Marlowe. And in that connection, uh, you must have heard the name of Mirandola. So Pico della Mirandola, uh, who had a new thesis on the human identity and human existence, and a new interpretation. However, so the operation of the free will, and free will, obviously, as you know, meant free choice. So human judgment was contingent upon choice. Uh, even if, uh, although you will observe, and many people raise this question, that during this time, a large section, a large body of cultural activity, including literature, painting, sculpture, everything, uh, that was predominated by biblical or Christian subjects. Yes, they were. But one thing has to be noticed with care, that biblical subjects were being interpreted differently, a new interpretation to biblical subject. Not the kind of thing, although very small in volume, that were created in the period of complete monolithic dominance of the Roman Catholic Church. In those days, whatever the church said to create or to propagate or to advocate was given an artistic form, was formalized in the area of art. But in this case, in the Renaissance, we find artists exercising their free judgment, free choice, free will, and therefore recreating the biblical subjects. And you will notice that in many of the paintings, sculptures, and in literature indeed, uh, plight, quote unquote, Plight, suffering of man, became one of the central focal points in the arts of the Renaissance. Uh, Alongside, uh, I would talk about a new perception that was being grown. Uh, the perception took absolutely new dimension after uh, Copernicus talking about uh, a new cosmic system, and ultimately in 1610 Galileo proving it by means of his mathematical calculations. But before I go to that, I must well talk about a new perception that the cosmos had both good and evil. That is, the cosmos had a wider moral world. The moral world was already divided. Before that, what happened, that majority of the cosmos was, yes, uh, Browning's Frali Polipi, wonderful. Uh, well, so the cosmos had both good and evil in the system itself. Had it not been so, the artists willingly, directly or indirectly, uh, raised the question as to how could it so happen that both God and Satan or the fallen angel and his followers, fallen angels, existed in the same cosmos. Uh, Whatever, I am not detailing upon that because that is a very big area which you might have confronted or come across while reading Paradise Lost, which was Milton's recreation of the Bible. Well, so cosmos has both good and evil. That is, the entire cultural milieu was exposed to a wider moral world. Alongside this, as I told you, that Reformation began as a very important, very well, turbulent religious movement, but Reformation did not remain or confine itself to a religious movement alone. Reformation had so much impact. The Lutheran movement, chiefly I mean, it had so much impact on the society and the cultural ethos of entire Europe in general and England in particular, but it was on Europe, that it became a social event as well as a religious event. Now, one of the primary demands that the Reformation made, or Luther and his followers, Martin Luther and his followers demanded, was the translation of the Holy Scriptures, translation of the Bible into modern European languages, which the church immediately opposed. And the church, as you know, held that only three languages were sacred and sacrosanct, tinte matro povitro bhasha, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. They might have driven Hebrew out as well, but they couldn't do so because, as you know, that the Bible and Christianity as a whole had its root in the Israelite ground, and therefore Hebrew could not really be well, shooed out, or in very bitter terms, kicked out. So Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. And they said translating the Bible or translating the Holy Scriptures into any modern European language would well, mar or cause harm, detriment to the holiness, the sacredness, the sanctity of the Holy Scriptures. And with this demand of translation of the Bible, in doing which many people well, faced lots of plight. Some of them had death on the stake as well. You know about Wycliffe, Tyndale, and others. So what I am trying to suggest is that there was the birth of the sense of quote-unquote nation, that England was a nation, Italy was a nation, France was a nation, Germany was a nation. I talk of Europe chiefly, or wholly for the present. Well, so there was a sense of nation. And what is the sense of nation? The perception of a national identity. As we feel proud to call us Indians, that I am an Indian first, then I am a Tamil or Odia or Bengali or whatever. So the sense of nation, and obviously that led to the spirit of patriotism and national culture. That is my focus. National culture. That the German culture and the French culture and the English culture and the Spanish culture and the Italian culture might have many things in common. One nation might borrow, one cultural stream might borrow a lot of things from another, but it was not the same. It is never the same. It can never be the same, because every nation has its geographical, demographical, spiritual, religious, and many other agricultural factors, climatic factors, which largely control not only our cultural behavior, but also our cultural creations, or I would say cultural text, quote unquote. And by text, I don't only mean written text or printed text. Everything that was created or done on the vast scenario and map of culture has to be considered as a text. And obviously, as created by man, it was a human text. A human text, right? So this sense of nation and the spirit of patriotism was actually what in our post-colonial times we say writing the nation. Writing the nation. So they were writing the nation. The English were writing the English nation. The Italians were writing the Italian nation. But this particular expression, writing the nation, came to be born much later as a part of the critical jargon structure. Well, and one very, so it was a nationalism as posed against a church culture, a clerical culture, an ecclesiastical culture. So in the Middle Ages or pre-Renaissance, I would preferably say, call it, whatever was said by the church, pronounced by the church, uttered by the church, proclaimed by the church, was taken as the be-all and end-all. It was for the first time in the Renaissance, that human opinions were ultimately turning into cultural pillars, opinions expressed in a creative and recreative manner. Right. One very important incident, which all of us, we all know, was the invention of the printing press. First in Germany. So you have one thing, obviously we can very easily underpin a very important characteristic feature of the Renaissance, that many things were happening in many countries, and those countries were trying to write their nation, but at the same time, they were also taking from other nations. So there was the transport of culture as well. So in Germany, somewhere around 1440, as you know, Gutenberg and his brother, Gutenberg brothers, they invented the technology of the printing press. But one might be very aware of the fact that Gutenberg first began his experiments with the movable type system in the 1440s. But it took him a long time, more than 14 years, to give it a final shape and institute and install a full-fledged printing press in 1454. And even before 1454, fragmented texts were printed, but 1454 was the year in which the printing press got a final shape, and in 1455 the Gutenberg Bible came out. But I am not going into those details. There are debates about it. The Europeans claim that 1455 Gutenberg Bible was the first printed text in the world, but recent researchers have found out, by recent I mean it was some 30 years ago, that the first printed text was from India in the 13th century. I'm not going into that. Some say it was in the 8th century. Okay, I'm not going into that area at all today. What I mean to say that printed text meant textualization. Textualization meant printing of books, multiplication of text or texts, that is from a single manuscript owned by the church masters, or maybe 3-4 manuscripts, well, held by limited, quite countable few people in the entire society. Printed text opened the avenue, the door to multiplication of the same text. Because in print, you can have multiple texts. So multiplication of text gave rise to what I should call textualization of culture. Culture যখন textualized হয়ে যায়, whenever culture is textualized, especially when texts are in a printed form, you cannot change it according to your will, or you cannot interpret it according to your will. I mean, you can interpret it in many ways, but you can't change the information contained in the text. And that was the basis of, which I mentioned before, the primary demand of the Reformationists, the Lutherans, that let the people know what is there in the Bible, what does the Bible say, and how should they come to know it. Obviously, when at least some people among them can read it. How many people in England in those days could read Greek or Latin or Hebrew? And therefore, Bible was confined to a very, very, very constricted, limited class of people. That is monopolization of knowledge. With the printing press, and alongside with the translation of the Bible being attempted by Tyndale, by Wycliffe, and many, many others, the Holy Scriptures came to be accessible texts that common people could access to the texts. They were exposed to the texts because of translation in the mother language or in their vernacular, and also the publication of those texts in printed form in multiplicity, right? So with textualization of culture, knowledge became a right, and there was, yes, Boishakhi Chatterjee, 1476 it came to England, okay, by William Caxton. But William Caxton, mind you, did not invent the press. He introduced the press in England, and while introducing the machine, I mean the printing press system in England, he made certain modifications. Everybody does that. But it came into existence in the 1450s in Germany. So the multiplication of texts and textualization of culture, as I said, uh, was establishing the common man's right to knowledge. Everybody can know. এই যে শুভদীপ বসে আছে, শুভদীপ ঘোষ. Yes. Now, শুভদীপকে আমি যদি বলি 1455 হ্যাঁ রীতা প্রধান কোনটা কারেক্ট আনসার চাইছো? পরে পরে প্রশ্নটা পরে, হ্যাঁ আমি বলিনি। হ্যাঁ, এখন শুভদীপকে আমি যদি বলি যে 1455 ইংল্যান্ডে প্রিন্টিং প্রেস হয়েছিল, শুভদীপ কি মেনে নেবে? মেনে নেবে না। He will say that you are not saying the right thing, sir, because you have sources to testify, to verify that kind of information. সেই সোর্স কি? এখন তো ইন্টারনেট ছেড়ে দাও, ইন্টারনেট যখন আসেনি, বুকস, রাইট? বাট when there had been no books, চারটে ম্যানুস্ক্রিপ্ট, একটা আমার কাছে, একটা তন্ময় স্যারের কাছে, আর একটা হয়তো মেবি কালীঘাটের প্রধান পুরোহিতের কাছে, আর একটা হয়তো প্রধানমন্ত্রীর কাছে। So whatever I say or Tanmoy sir says has to be accepted as true. This was the shift from monopoly of knowledge to democratization of knowledge. Knowledge also became a democratic right, access to knowledge. And now, what are the branches? There had been multiple branches of knowledge that were flourishing in those period. So there was a clash between the scientific knowledge, the new knowledge, the new episteme or epistemology, and the ecclesiastical or the old knowledge, clashing outlooks. Because in this new cultural ethos, cultural practice, quote unquote, divine was replaced by quote unquote human. The divine did not take its adieu, goodbye. No, the divine was very much there, but the human parallelly was also there. And in astronomy, the first man was Kepler, who did a mathematical calculation but could not reach his conclusion. There, obviously, everybody knows Copernicus, but Copernicus's writing a movement of the orbs, that was a hypothesis which finally, that was in 1543, Copernicus's book came out, and in 1610, almost a century later, after a long life of plight and struggle, Galileo proved it through mathematical calculations. 2-3 more very small informations. A man called Vesalius. Vesalius was the first man to write a book on the human anatomy, body structure of man. Look how science was developing. Servetus from Spain was the first man to write a book on the circulation of blood in the human body. So science, physical science, medical science, human body, human mind, human spirit, all were becoming important and partaking a tremendously impactful dimension. Right. Then there were, as you all know, the sea voyages, multiple sea voyages. And I hope you have all read uh, Dunn's Good Morrow, where there's a line, let sea discover us to, I don't exactly remember the line, let sea discover us, go to newer lands and, uh, draw maps on maps to show other worlds. The, the essence of that line is, was what the Renaissance was actually experiencing. That is, these sea voyages, multiple sea voyages, Vasco da Gama, Amerigo Vespucci, a lot of people. Okay, so they were going and discovering new lands. Sometimes, like the discovery of India, it was a misleading experience. And later on, actually, India was discovered. So, discovery of new lands, which meant the change in the world map. Change in the world map. The world map was undergoing a vital and huge change. আগে জানতাম আমার বাড়িটাই আমার দেশ, তারপর জানলাম পাড়াটা দেশ, তারপর জানলাম পুরুলিয়াটাই দেশ, তারপর জানলাম পশ্চিমবঙ্গটা দেশ, তারপর জানলাম ভারতবর্ষটা দেশ, তারপর জানলাম আরো আরো দেশ আছে পৃথিবীতে। তার মানে কি? The magnification of the world of exposure, the discovery of at least a part of the cosmos, and the world map underwent change. With this change, national borders, national identity became very important. So it was at the same time also the discovery of wonder, right? uh, well, in writing, you see, there was, as I was talking about cultural ethics, the ethics was changing. The ethics were changing. Three examples. First, Erasmus, who talked on the follies of the church. Erasmus showed for the first time that church can also be ridiculed and satirized, which nobody ever imagined before Erasmus. Then there was Thomas More, Utopia, you all know. Now, what was Utopia? An idealized world, but where More claims that this world can become such a utopia. Yes, Marlowe too. Utopia, all right? That is, through the concept of utopia, the ideal world, More claims that an ideal world can be here and not in heaven. Or even if there is an ideal world in heaven, we can have an ideal world here as well, here, quote unquote, here in this world. Machiavelli, importance of diplomacy, of power and cunning on the part of the king. And as I pronounce the word king, I must talk about the parliament, which was, monarchy was there, but it was a democratic monarchy. You all know possibly that for a long time, more than 3 years, the parliament continued in England in the times of Henry VIII. So it was a parliamentary democracy or democratic monarchy, not the papal monarchy, P-A-P-A-L, papal, coming from Pope. So papal monarchy, the monarch was, well, as you know, just a doll. And the orders actually came down from the church. Uh, but here we see the birth of a democratic monarchy. And with this, our rights, our powers, our capabilities, by our I mean human capabilities, human power, human creativity, human rights, and the ability to create a model idealized world in our earth, on the earth itself, gave rise to a complete overturn of ethics, social ethics, and that social ethics began reflecting in the cultural world. So sense of morality and the sense of ethics were overturned, and largely that was the combined effect of the cultivation of new culture, or the old culture revived and reconstructed on the one hand, and the Reformationist Lutheran movement, which made the people of entire Europe, not only England, uh, about the rights of man, the accessibility to knowledge of man. And in this case, I already told about the translation. The translations brought the entire world to England, or brought the entire world to Germany, I mean other nations to their countries or nations. And when we talk of translation in the mother tongue of the Bible, which was, as I told you, a demand by the uh, well, Lutherans are, or the Protestants, uh, language became very important. And the entire Renaissance and the Elizabethan period gave high importance to language, because they believed in the power of words, which, as you have been mentioning, somebody mentioned Marlowe, somebody might mention Shakespeare, somebody might mention Bacon, somebody also Erasmus or Machiavelli even. You can see that language has that magical power. Words have that magical power of creating and pulling the human mind to the valleys of, to the provinces of new experience, new feeling, new realization, new perception. So language became the harbinger, the forerunner, the carrier, the the vehicle for this moral and ethical revolution. And cultural ethics obviously took up a new form. The things which were avoided in previous culture were now being given glorious forms. It was both the glorification of humanity and at the same time critique of humanity, a kind of alarm to the depths of evil into which man might fall down. That is the story of all great tragedies of the Renaissance, chiefly the Elizabethan and the Jacobean tragedies. So culture now began embodying ethical issues or moral issues, and they were not necessarily always Christian issues, but other issues as well, political issues, social issues. And even while Christian issues were taken as a component in the body of a cultural text, For example, in Macbeth, everybody knows Macbeth. Tanmay, my time is over. I know.
Yes, sir.
Just half
Sorry, you can
just
continue.
half minute. For
Listen to
example,
this, sir.
I had the most need of blessing, wherefore could not I pronounce Amen. I had the most need of blessing, and Amen stuck in my throat. It is a Christian issue, or rather, uh, expressed in terms of the Christian sentiment or ethos. But the problem is not exclusively a Christian problem. It is one of the earliest, one of the most rudimentary human issues, issues of the human soul. And so therefore, what we have in the Renaissance is a changed and revolutionized cultural ethics. Specifically, this revolution in cultural ethics, modes of presentation, and the experimentations and departures in the form of theater, that will be the content of my next lecture. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this informative, exhaustive session. And we all think some of your students who attended your classes long ago, so they are here listening to
Gotcha.
your speech, and it is always charming to listen to you. And I'm elated, happy, charmed again to have you among us. We can still remember the days you taught us Renesha, and really love the way you pronounce the word Renesha. So and you have revived those golden days again.
Thank
So we
you.
can
Thank you. Okay.
so we can see the messages, how the messages flooded. So now I request students or participants if they have any question, so they can ask you directly. They can feel free to ask you.
Hello, sir.
Yes, yes, yes.
Am I
Hello.
audible, sir? This is Ivana.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful lecture you have delivered. We all are spellbound just. Sir,
Thank you.
actually, I have a query, sir. May I ask?
Yes, yes, of course.
Sir, as you have already mentioned a lot of things, a detailed analysis of Renaissance period, I have a question regarding the English Renaissance and the Italian Renaissance. I mean, how English Renaissance is different from Italian Renaissance. For example, if we say idea of Renaissance has come under the increased criticism by many cultural historians, and have contended that the English Renaissance has no real tie with the artistic achievements of the Italian artists like Leonardo, then Michelangelo, so who are closely associated, identified with the Renaissance visual art. So how it is difficult, how it is different from except the timing period, English Renaissance and Italian Renaissance. What is the main difference, sir?
Okay.
If you can
Uh,
explain.
okay. In short, it is a very it's a huge issue for discussion. Tonmoy possibly can recall the past days when we spent hours together on such issues.
Yes, sir.
Well, in
10
short,
to 6.
in brief, the Italian Renaissance was the mother of European Renaissance. There's no way, denying it. But the and Italian Renaissance obviously preceded the English Renaissance. As I told you, that Renaissance was like a wave. It was
Yes.
never an overnight project or a project of a decade, not even a
Okay.
project of a century. It continued for uh, nearly 3 centuries, 250, 60 years, when we have the fruits of the Renaissance. So it moved from one country to another. And if we can etch or draw the curve of the movement of Renaissance in Europe. I obviously restrict my lecture and discussion, this discourse to European Renaissance, because we had Bengal Renaissance here also, and in many other countries, okay, or states. So if we can etch the curve more or less in brief, এত একেবারে স্পেসিফাই করে তো বলা যায় না, these are cultural and social issues, so you cannot really restrict it within definite calendar date and time, but more or less, if the Italian Renaissance was the beginning and the first flourishing of the Renaissance spirit, the revival spirit, the English Renaissance was its final culmination.
Okay.
What you are asking, obviously requires attention, but not really that you can accuse the development of Renaissance in one country in terms of another country. If painting tremendously, painting, sculpture, that is the visual arts,
Yes.
developed tremendously in Italy, uh, the theater form did not manifest or flourish in the same degree in Italy, or I think not in a mentionable dimension at all, which it did very much in England. So, I mean, the spirit of the Renaissance was more or less the same, because as you know, in England, if painting was not developed, if another, well, if another Da Vinci or another
Mm.
Michelangelo was not born in England, but a Marlowe, a Webster, and above all, a Shakespeare was born in England, and well, uh, actually shook the Elizabethan stage. That is one. But on the other hand, you have many continuities as well. One, I mean the Italian continuity. For example, in the form of sonnet, we all
Yes.
know that Petrarchan sonnet was one of the, but before Petrarch, there was sonnet also in unfinished and other varied forms. We don't have that much of time to discuss it here. But if we more or less, as is usually accepted, if we begin from Petrarch, it was the Petrarchan sonneteering tradition that flowed down through many countries, ultimately to England. The English sonnetiers began by simply copying Petrarch, but at
Yes.
the same time instituting newer and newer changes, both in form, শুধু form নয়. Somebody consider that Petrarch was ABBA, BBA, etc., etc., and this was ABCD, ABCD, etc. No, not that. It was a revolution in form, the change coming through Spencer, I mean, Sydney, Spencer, finally Shakespeare in form. But if we consider the contents of the, I mean, the sonnet, English sonneteering was a revolution upon the basic platform. Uh, yes, yes, content, that is theme. Yes. Uh, uh, so that also got tremendously revolutionized. On the other hand, for example, I talked of theater, which I will talk more about on 29th. In theater also, the revival began with Seneca. The first English tragedy everybody knows, Gorboduc,
Yes.
was a
Nicholson.
series of murders, bloodshed, and a chain of revenges. So the revenge tradition was actually a primary borrowing from Seneca, who was a first century AD Roman writer. thinker, Stoic philosopher. So, not that everything came through Italy, but later on, many things came directly from the classical ages and were recreated, reboomed, and exhaustively reconstructed in the period of Renaissance, that is the Elizabethan and Jacobean period. So you have multiplicity. The fun, the pleasure of Renaissance is its multiplicity. একজন শেক্সপিয়ার পুরো রেনেসাঁটা নয়, আবার একজন লিওনার্দো দা ভিঞ্চিও পুরো রেনেসাঁটা নয়, শুধু ইটালি রেনেসা নয়, শুধু ইংল্যান্ডও রেনেসা নয়। এই জন্যই তো এটা এত বড়। It was the beginning of the whole thing, and it is really very uh, it is very enthralling and very astonishing to conceive how so many things within a century began developing, bubbling up. So I think one of the reasons was the monolithic dominance of the church. Obviously, we all know, if we don't know, at least we know that cooking is done in our households. So while cooking, if you put on a very heavy lid like a pressure cooker and don't let the steam come out, it will burst at a time. So Renaissance was that bursting with the uplifting of the lid of monolithic dominance of the Roman Catholic Church. So many streams, so many branches, ramifications of the expression of human individualism, human freedom, and human creativity came out to exist. Somebody asked me a question on individualism. Yes, individualism was born, but it started with individual identity, whether it was for the good of the long-term human history of the human race or not, is a different discussion and discourse altogether, which requires a lot of time. But later on also, when we talk about absurd theater, modernism, avant-garde, etc., etc., and all the anti-fascist movements and anti-fascist culture that was created in the 20th century, we see the same kind of suppression of individual identity and freedom of thought and expression, for which all these artists clamored. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, sir. Before I take now next question and I forget, so I like to share as my students are there still, and I have got this platform because I had the desire to have you physically in my college. So my headship is going to end in June 30th. It has now 5 days remaining. So, and I will have that desire to have you physically, though virtually I have got you. So the way when we were students, you used to teach us from 10 to 6, I think, to what extent I can remember, and you used to teach Macbeth for a long stretch of time, for 8 hours almost, and we used to get half an hour break, so out of 8 hours, and you used to give us the singaracha at the time. So, and the way you used to deliver Macbeth's soliloquy, so it seemed to us that Macbeth has come to us. So we are seeing Macbeth. So for our students, I like to inform them that if you want to have as I already mentioned, he is a good orator and actor also, and he's currently associated with the cultural group Udatto. They have many more presentations. You can find them on YouTube. If you want that link, I will share later the YouTube link. And the Soliloquy that was presented by, acted by Sir and Ma'am, Indani Ma'am, respecting Indani Ma'am, Indani Deb Ma'am. So, okay, sir. Next question. Anyone is there to ask, sir? They have written. Shubhadeep Das, do you think Renaissance is a kind of cultural ideology? Shubhadeep, are you there? Shubhadeep?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. Sir, I have a question. Do you think Renaissance is a kind of cultural ideology? Because it is a kind of revolution. So, every revolution has behind, in every revolution, there is a behind of ideology, I think. So, do you think Renaissance is a kind of cultural ideology?
Of course it was. And I already mentioned that it was a revolution. And in my next lecture on 29th, my title itself is Elizabethan Theatre, Evolution or Revolution. So it was both evolution and revolution. It had indeed a cultural ideology, which I discussed quite at length, that from a papal dominance, from a clerical dominance, from the dominance of the church, which basically propagated the church culture.
Okay.
I would not say Christian culture, but the church culture. It was Christian culture in a form which the church, well, liked to propagate or loved to propagate or wished to propagate. Yes, papal authority. So that papal culture, under papal authority, and the new culture that Renaissance gave birth to had to be ideologically different. And I told in the early section of my lecture that, well, uh, the divine was replaced, quote unquote, by the human. And I also mentioned that, well, this perception also was born and popularized and extensively dealt upon with, that there are both the good and evil in this cosmos. That is, if evil had not been there at all in the creation, then why did at all, I mean, Lucifer and his followers revolted against God? What was the need of, well, pushing them down, and according to Milton, falling for 9 days and nights, and ultimately creating a place called hell with
Yeah.
its hellfire? Uh, and what was the cause as to why Satan, in the form of a serpent, had to tempt Eve to eat the fruit, and why at all, after eating the fruit, man had fall from paradise? So this chain of events that gives us uh, an entry and access to a new ideological, I should say, matrix,
Okay.
a paradigm in which good and evil both are in this cosmic system. If good was created, even if in case we accept the authority of God, Although, as you know, uh, since the time of Blake, new interpretations of the Christianity or the Bible was taking place, where God becomes, you must know, must be knowing the three entities of God, the Trinity. So God the Father, the Holy Ghost, God the Father, and Son of the Lord, Christ. But since the time of Blake, in fact, even from before that, Blake brought it to an artistic expression. God is seen as God the tyrannical father. Because in the history of the Bible, we repeatedly see that God is nothing else but a punisher. He punishes Lucifer and his followers. He
Yes, sir.
punishes Adam and Eve, but he's also the prime creator. Yeah. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Son means Son of the Lord. So, this was a new ethics. This was obviously, therefore, a new ideology. The ideology which kept possibly, somebody asks a question on individualism, possibly an overemphasis on individualism. And it had some of its bad sides as well. But we must look at the much, much higher and broader, better sides of that kind of individualistic ideology. Not only individualistic, alongside individualism, the ideology of scanning the world of God or the cosmos, which was not there in times of papal authority, church dominance, and at the same time perceiving a new perception, as I told you, that the creation, the cosmos, contains both good and evil. And thirdly, that the world can be recreated. Man can, if God is the prime or the first creator, man can become the second creator, the artist. This is the reason why artists were given very high position in the Renaissance period. Uh, a reference to this would be our study of Apology for Poetry
Wait.
by Sir Philip Sidney,
Sydney.
where he claims that the poet is the highest among men, because the poet is not only the philosopher or the teacher, he is both, but above all, he is the creator. So he is next to God, and that's why highest in the society. That was the uh, ethos and ideology. সেই জন্যই রেভলিউশনটা হচ্ছে. You are very right in
Okay, sir.
raising that
Thank you, sir.
point.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
Hello, sir. Sir, am I
yes,
am I audible?
yes, quite.
Sir, first of all, I would like to show my respect and regards to you for your outstanding, full, informative, and ever charming lecture. Sir, I have
Thank
a query. Sir, generally, sonnet was introduced and popularized more during the time of Renaissance period, and the sonneteers expressed their personal feelings, requited fulfilled or unfulfilled love towards their lady love, of course through sonnet writings. So my question is here, how were sonnets charged with Renaissance elements?
you. Okay. Tonmoy,
Yes, sir.
people are asking questions
Sir, it will.
which call for new lectures.
Yes,
So in short,
it's a never-ending process, sir. It will
yeah.
continue.
Okay. So my question to, I think, Mohan Narsingha.
So
Yes.
he's our ex-student now, passed out from he has
Yeah.
done his
The
PG from
question
Buddha Civil
the
University.
question was done by Mohan. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So you see what you said, that poets expressing their unrequited love for their beloveds, that was not the complete frame of Renaissance sonnet. My first point. That was the Petrarchan frame, the Petrarchan matrix. Because Petrarchan is a sonnet series, which we call sonnet sequence. The idea also comes from Petrarch. And in Petrarch, we see several features like, well, adoring the beloved, glorifying the beloved, comparing her to uh, a goddess, and she is the heavenly thing, and the lover. And now you must be aware of the triple identity, the trio identity: the poet, the lover, and the speaker. It is the same. The poet is the speaker. The poet presumes or projects himself as the lover. It might have an actual background, it might not have an actual background, doesn't matter. Uh, and obviously, he is a poet. So, poet, lover, speaker is the trio identity, trio complex. Now, what this poet, lover, speaker does in Petrarch is wooing, placing his love, prem nibedon kor, and by, well, praising the beauty, and chiefly the physical beauty. You have so nice hair, and you have so nice eyes, and you have so nice eyelids and eyebrows, and lips indeed, and cheek and look, and etc., etc., etc. মানে Mohan, do you understand Bangla?
Is there, I am I am
Oh,
sir full-heartedly Bengali.
ও আচ্ছা আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, ইউ আর বাঙালি। নরসিংহ তো ওই জন্য আমি ভাবছি যে ওকে। একটা 70 দশকের খুব বিখ্যাত হেমন্ত মুখোপাধ্যায়ের গান জানো কোথায়? মেঘ কালো। Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
মেঘ কালো, আধার কালো।
No. Yes. Am I audible, sir? I'm listening.
I forget the line, sorry.
So ওই কালো চুল এরকম একটা ছিল হয়তো, কালো তোমার চুল বা কালো তোমার বেনি, জাস্ট এরকম একটা ছিল হয়তো স্যার, আমি এক্স্যাক্টলি ঠিক মনে করতে পারছি না।
Whatever. I miss just one phrase. Make kalo, adhar kalo, and there is another phrase. Je kalite binodini haralo tar kul, আহা তার চেয়েও কালো কন্যা তোমার মাথার চুল। This is tip. Aha, wonderful, thank you. মেঘ কালো, আধার কালো, আর কলঙ্ক যে কালো, যে কালিতে বিনোদিনী হারালো তার কুল, আহা তার চেয়েও কালো কন্যা তোমার মাথার চুল। A typical Petrarchan mimesis. ওকে, এইটা পেট্রার্কান সিরিজে কিভাবে এসেছে? গ্লোরিফিকেশন, প্রেজ, অ্যাডোরেশন of physical beauty, parts of the body, parts of the face. বডি বেশি নেই, আবার সেসব পরে মেটাফিজিক্যালরা এনেছিলেন, ওই ফেসে গিয়ে আটকে যাচ্ছে আর কি, গলার নিচে নামা বারণ, খুব ভদ্রসভ্য কবিতা আর কি। কিন্তু সেখানে একটা অদ্ভুত ব্যাপার আছে, there is a nagging. যদি পেট্রার্কান সিরিজ ভালো করে পড়ো কখনো, you will see there is a nagging, that the lover continuously nags, oh I love you so much, you are so beautiful, you are like a goddess, oh I love you so much, oh I could love nobody better, yes yes yes, etc etc etc. And the final appeal is, why don't you marry me, why can't we marry? And the beloved of the lady goes on rejecting it, goes on rejecting it. No, no, no. আর প্রেম টেম ঠিক আছে, ও বিয়ে টিয়ে না, no marriage. And sometimes the lady says, oh, পরে হোক, later, sometime later. এই যে ট্র্যাডিশনটা, if you remember, এইটাকে directly, nakedly and tremendous, with tremendous power অ্যাটাক করেছেন কে? To his coy mistress Marvel. This waiting is not for you, not for us. Had we but world enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime. কিন্তু রেনেসাঁ সনেটিয়ারিং এ এসে জিনিসটা অনেকটাই পাল্টে গেল, বিকজ of several things. আমি দুটো মেনশন করছি। One, the approach of the poet shifted from merely the physical, টা আছে এখানে, কিন্তু এটা secondary. The soul, the mind, the spirit of love became the primary, that was prioritized. Number one. Number two, three things I will mention. Number two, there was a constant sense and extension of the feeling of mortality, time and mortality, that we are all mortal. So after a time, things will be forgotten. But I don't want our love to be forgotten. I don't want you to be forgotten by the world. And therefore, I will make you permanent, as you find in Spencer, through poetry. But then, if love can be immortalized through art or poetry, that has to be created. And in Sydney, you find the pangs, the pains of a creator or a poet. That is, Sydney says, I am full-bellied with a big belly, like a pregnant woman, because poetry is my child, and unless I deliver it properly, successfully, my pains will not end. And this is a pain which is realized in case of a child only by the mother, in case of poetry or art only by the poet or the artist. এইটা একটা বিশাল শিফট ইন পারসেপশন। এই শিফট ইন পারসেপশনটার পেছনেও আগের যে প্রশ্নটা হয়েছিল, যেটাকে আইডিওলজি বলা হচ্ছে, আইডিওলজি মানে তো শুধু তত্ত্ব নয় যে মানে আমি রাইটিস্ট, আমি লেফটিস্ট, আমি মার্কসিস্ট ও ফ্রয়েডিয়ান, এটা তো শুধু নয়। আইডিওলজি is reflected in the entire life culture and in the entire creative culture. This is the shift. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. We have to end this session.
Yeah.
It will continue. So I now request our student. Yes. Who is there?
Sir, I'm Shongita.
হ্যাঁ বলো সঙ্গীতা।
Hello, sir. I am audible.
Yes, audible. সঙ্গীতা ব্যানার্জি।
Sir, thank. Na, sir, Shongita Das.
Oh, student.
I see. Sarani College.
Hello.
Nistani College. Sankita, you are audible.
Has
Okay.
sir.
Okay.
Has sir. Nishtayandi College.
Yes.
So thank you so much for the session. I guess last time I attended your session in our workshop, and now. So thank you for the session. It was very much informative, and more than that, I love the answers what you gave to the questions. Not only the session, but the answers that what you provide us. So thank you for all these things.
Okay, thank you so much.
So, as you have mentioned the workshop, I can still remember that when sir was going to the stage, towards the stage, and the huge clapping show was started, and it did not stop until sir asked them to stop. So it continued for 10 minutes.
Yes.
No, Tanmoy is
Yes,
exaggerating.
we all
No, sir.
Tanmoy is
remember that,
exaggerating things.
and that time we're feeling like Oedipus was there. We are not
Oedipus was there.
actually seeing
Yes.
Dr.
You are right.
Chhandam Deb sir on the stage. It
You are
was
right.
actually Oedipus on the stage.
So
Okay.
you have seen Oedipus, and we
Sir,
have
we
seen
want
Macbeth.
Macbeth too.
Okay.
Sir, we
Thank
want
you.
Macbeth too on stage.
Okay, we are thinking of it. We are thinking of it. Okay.
So, okay, sir. So now
Yes.
I request our student of
Okay, sir.
UG
Thank you.
second semester, Sion, are you there? Sion?
Yes, sir. Am I audible or not?
Okay. Yes. Now I request you to give sir the formal vote of thanks.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I, Shayan Shankopain, on behalf of the Department of English, MIDNAPORE College Autonomous, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to our chief speaker, Dr. Chhandam Deb, Associate Professor of JK College, affiliated to Shidokano Birsa University, Purulia. I must mention our deep thought of appreciation for Dr. Chhandam Dev for his excellent speech. I would like to express our profound gratitude to our respected principal sir, Dr. Kupal Chandra Bera, for giving us the permission to arrange such a wonderful lecture series. Also, I would like to thank Professor Tanmay Kundu, who has taken this great initiative. Finally, the listeners who have turned in such great numbers, not only from our state, but also from other states also. Once again, I thank you all for your cordial cooperation. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Tanmoy.
sir. Thank you,
And
sir, coming online. And I think my dream has has been fulfilled to some extent.
okay, thank you, Tanmoy, and convey my thanks to Dr. Bera as well. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Thank you.